Just days before Thanksgiving, and Mayor-elect Bill de Blasio gets a turkey of a reception from his old boss and the last Democrat to call Gracie Mansion home. David Dinkins making some news here with his comments he made to RFL weeks ago. We've got the videotape to prove it. And then, from a boys' club to a women's world, the 20 women of the U.S. Senate widely praised for ending the shutdown and debt limit crisis. So the question is, why don't more women seek elective office, and are there double standards in play when they do? And later, two issues that critics would say involve a whole lot of gambling, but maybe the real questions about fracking and casinos ought to be, would you want them in your backyard? Well, tonight, we'll ask our panel. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday evening, November 25th. It has been exactly 3 weeks now since Bill de Blasio won the New York City mayor's race by a landslide, nearly 50 points. And with 5 more weeks till he actually takes office, the mayor-elect has already seen his fair share of criticism. Most of that, it's been from Republicans or big business critics, but not anymore. No, last night it was David Dinkins who turned the heat up on de Blasio. Dinkins, the last Democratic mayor, as many of you know, the city's seen, and the man de Blasio once worked for when, in fact, he met his future wife. He shared a stage with de Blasio last night. And after being praised by the mayor-elect, Dinkins says the Times responded with an arrow. What the report called an unscripted and cringe-inducing moment of political candor. It's all about de Blasio's push to provide universal pre-K schooling and pay for it with a top-end tax increase. Now, Dinkins last night suggested a different approach, throwing a wrench into what was meant to be a carefully choreographed day of municipal theater. Dinkins' proposal: tax suburban commuters, not top-end city residents. As for de Blasio, he reportedly kept a quote-unquote mirthless smile on his face. "I take your point to heart," he said, end quote. Now, maybe de Blasio should have seen this coming. We did, after all, since Dominic Carter sat down with Mayor Dinkins a few weeks back. And Dom, he kind of gave us a cue of what we were going to hear last night.
He sure did, Richard, and the reality is starting to set in for Mayor-elect de Blasio. Campaigning with promises is one thing, delivering is something else. De Blasio, as Richard said, wants to pay for his universal pre-K idea with a tax on the rich. But there are some that feel the idea will not get the green light with the legislature in Albany. And it can be awkward when it's one of your mentors expressing the doubt. De Blasio worked for Dinkins as mayor and met his wife during the Dinkins years. Dinkins feels de Blasio will be much more successful pursuing a commuter tax on people that work in the city. And de Blasio didn't know that it was right here on this show weeks ago that Dinkins poured water on the idea of taxing the rich. Dinkins did it again in public yesterday at Columbia University, right in front of de Blasio.
I wish that Mayor Bloomberg had expended the same energy and zeal in getting what they call a commuter tax. This is a tax, personal income tax, on people, non-residents, who work in the city. Shelley Silver gave it away, really. It's a long political story, but he did. So I think the new mayor should fight for that. This is the first opportunity I've had to say that publicly, so you got a scoop.
And that was, Richard, before the mayor was hospitalized, I believe, with pneumonia. But he really believes in this idea, this commuter tax. Now, it isn't exclusive because he said this, it made the Times today, but he said this to us about a month ago.
And I think it shows, you know, a lot of people like the idea and like the messaging that Blasio said, first with the stop and frisk and then the tale of two cities. But how he's going to pay for it's the tricky part. To that end, and I want to bring our panel right now here, and right with us, one of our favorites here, Republican strategist Jessica Proud, sitting next to Dominic, and to my right,
welcome back.
Another one of our favorites, New York Assemblywoman Shelley Mayer, Democrat from Yonkers, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And I'll ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Jessica. Commuter tax, this isn't a novel approach, but there's a reason it died. People don't like paying for it if you're coming into the city.
Yeah, well, it's never going to happen. The Senate actually made a huge push, and it helped them regain control of the legislature in helping to abolish it. And you have all of Long Island senators are Republicans, and there's no way that they're going to reinstate this. And even, frankly, Democrats from Westchester County, no one wants to see this come back except people in the city.
I've got one here at the table. Let me ask. I take you're not doing cartwheels over a commuter tax.
Well, I actually totally agree. I think, one, you have this large group of Democrats and Republicans in the suburbs that have a lot of power in the legislature, taking just everything else aside. And example for me, where I have a lot of constituents who drive in, or who drive in periodically, and for whom the commuter tax would be a substantial burden, and I think would be a real problem. It was a problem every time it's come before the legislature, and it died. And I just don't see it coming back. I think there may be a better chance.
Let's consider the alternative, though. The alternative is de Blasio goes with Plan A, and that is, hey, you make $1 million bucks a year or more here. I want you to dig deeper in your pocket. I know he said that on the campaign trail, and I know he won with a big margin, but is that really politically feasible?
Well, I think we don't know yet. I think the governor has hedged his bets on that. He's sort of walked on both sides of the street. I think because it would be perhaps New York City only or directed at New York City, if there's enough support within the city delegation in the assembly, and if the Senate Republicans and the IDC are willing to let it go, there's a possibility they could fly. It may be in a different form than de Blasio anticipated.
But to me, the real story, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out with Albany and with the de Blasio's tax plans, but man, if David Dinkins is already in public throwing knives your way, as he did last night, is this what we're going to be in for the next 4 years with Mayor de Blasio once he takes off? He's not even sworn in yet. He didn't get sworn in until January 1st.
How short will the honeymoon be? I mean, you obviously have the labor contracts that he's going to have to deal with here, and while there was kumbaya, everyone's saying, I waited for 3 years. Now it's time for me to get paid.
Honeymoon's going to be very short. Let's face it. There are very few people that believe that Mr. de Blasio is qualified to be the mayor of New York, or that he should be the mayor of New York. And he simply outflanked his other Democratic rivals, Christine Quinn and Bill Thompson. Those are the two names that stood out as on the Democratic side that would win the nomination. But at the end of the day, de Blasio won. We'll see if he can work his magic, but it's not going to be a walk in the park. And if you listen to the answer that we heard from the elected official right here, this is a fellow Democrat. What do you think is going to happen when he gets up to Albany, hat in hand, with Governor Cuomo in an election year?
We'll talk later, and Governor Cuomo is talking about cutting taxes on the statewide level next year, which would make more belt tightening going on in cities, including Gotham. All right, now from the man who will be mayor to the man who would be governor. Westchester executive Republican Rob Astorino getting the Chris Christie treatment in local and state media since winning re-election by a pretty hefty margin 3 weeks ago. And it's not just because they're both considered popular, more moderate Republicans, Andrew. They're also saying this might be the best shot and maybe a short list here of potentials.
Well, and they've also been directly linked in the news quite a bit in the last couple of weeks lately, Rich. First up, Astorino's month in the sun. Headlines like this one: GOP pins hopes to Astorino for challenge versus Cuomo as one of the leading GOP gubernatorial possibilities in New York State. Last week, the two men actually sat down talking gubernatorial races. They spent an hour together at the Republican Governors Association meeting in Arizona. So what happened? Well, what didn't happen was Christie encouraging Astorino to run against Andrew Cuomo. That's according to Andrew Cuomo, who says he asked Christie about it when they spoke this week. Also in the didn't happen file, Christie committing his support to Astorino if he did run. That a source from the Wall Street Journal reporting. And then there's some other news here that might be less than stellar for Rob Astorino if he wants to run for governor. Two new polls out, one with Cuomo leading Astorino by 37 points. The other has him leading by 42 points. And then there's this headline, too. Just how much of an uphill struggle might it be for Astorino? Cuomo is among People magazine's sexiest 50-somethings, alongside Bruce Willis, Daniel Day-Lewis, Dennis Quaid, and Colin Firth.
I hear
just to
laughter
name
at
a
the
few.
table.